Good evening and welcome to the Legion Cantina. In today's episode, we're going to be ranking all the Force users in Star Wars Legion. So yeah, a fairly straightforward video, probably quite a long video, but a straightforward video nonetheless. Essentially, all I'm going to do is just put all the Force users in Star Wars Legion into a tier list. Going to be starting at sort of D tier, which is, in my opinion, it's units that make a list worse almost irrespective of the list you're building. So situationally very weak and generally very weak as well. C is that in some situations they can be okay or even good, but most of the time they're not probably going to enhance the power of your list, so kind of below average. B tier is they're probably not going to make your list that much worse or that much better. They might be situationally fairly strong with some lists, but in general probably not super strong. And then A tier is kind of consistently fairly good or situationally very good. So in some lists they really enhance your list. In other situations they're probably just like fairly good. And then S tier is like they're consistently very powerful. They're kind of build arounds. They nearly always make your list better. So as I said, we're going to start in D tier and then going to work our way up to S tier. And starting at the bottom in D tier, in my opinion, the weakest Force user in the game is going to be Fifth Brother. Now, I've talked about this before, and he actually won the poll for like weakest Empire unit, and I think up there for probably weakest unit in the game. Essentially, he is a melee-focused unit that doesn't have access to charge. And that fundamentally changes like how you have to like interact with other units in the game, because unless you are wounded for 2, which is surprisingly difficult to achieve sometimes, like getting that balance between being wounded and then actually taking too much damage and dying. But if you're not wounded, all you can actually do if you're doing 2 moves is just move into them to block, which in some situations is okay. Like there are situations where moving into a Force user, for instance, like a big Force user like Anakin, Vader, Dooku, well, less so Dooku because he can get through your immune pierce, but where moving into them to slow them down is fine. But if that's your entire plan and you're going to end up spending probably close to 120 points to do that, it's probably just not that relevant. And it's so easy, especially if you don't have any dodge access, to just get run over. And the fact he can't come with a prepared supplies, for instance, because he only has 2 training slots and a Force slot, yeah, is just a problem. And I think another issue that I'll come on to in a second in more detail is his command cards. So I'll talk about those in a separate section. But one of them is just almost unusable. Like, I really don't understand why that's even in the game. And then one of his 2 pips is a little bit better if you're bringing Seventh Sister, which I assume you are most of the time. But yeah, I think basically I've kind of talked about this before, but in order to make him kind of relevant and action efficient, he has to be wounded for 2, and then he needs to be down at 4 wounds with no innate surge to block, which means like a hit from, arcs, for instance, even if it's just a base unit with targeting scopes, is probably going to take you down. And in this kind of age where like there are some armies that run around with some huge dice balls, yeah, it's just a huge problem. So I don't know. I think, if he went up by 5 points and got charge innately or something, that then changes the relevances in Rage 2 and stuff like that. I've talked about Fifth Brother before, but I think, yeah, I'm quite confident in saying he's probably the worst Force user in the game. And just, I don't understand how he's ever actually going to make a list better by being in it currently. But yeah, you never know. If he sees a points drop or something, he could become a bit more relevant. I think it is worth noting the theme's fairly good. Like, I almost wonder if him and Seventh Sister have been made like intentionally quite bad because that's how they were portrayed in the Star Wars shows. So I don't know, like maybe that's like a really like meta angle that they've taken. But yeah, to quickly run through the command cards, his 3 pip giving units Dauntless when he already has Dauntless is just stupid. Like it should have some kind of different ability on it as like a reason to play it. And don't get me wrong, like Dauntless is a nice ability, but when it already has it on his base card, it needed something else. So yeah, just any other keyword would have been more exciting. And then you would question me is basically sort of a synergy piece. It's kind of like opposite teamwork, but it doesn't stack. If one of them gains 2 aims, the other unit only gets 1 of the opposite tokens. So it's not like if he got 2 aims, Seventh Sister would get 2 dodges. If he got 2 aims, Seventh Sister would only get 1 dodge. There's fairly niche situations where that would matter, but the fact that this isn't just straight up teamwork is interesting because at least it doesn't have that kind of range restriction, so they can operate on other sides of the battlefield, which is nice. But Yeah, it's not terrible. And I think a big issue with this one is because it's a 2-pip. I mean, when are you playing this? Maybe turn 2 as a setup card, but then, you don't always want to go that quickly on turn 2. And then also, if you do want to do something aggressive on turn 2, you're probably being a bit more aggressive than just going for this sort of fairly niche 2-pip. So yeah, again, it's just slow. It doesn't make any sense, and I think as an overall package, the Fifth Brother and Seventh Sister just don't make much sense. Moving on to the next weakest unit, it's also going to be in D tier, and it's going to be Seventh Sister, so the other side of the Fifth Brother, Seventh Sister coin. She does have a couple of nice upgrades over Fifth Brother. Specifically, she has Jump 1, she has Charge, and getting Interrogate is also a really nice utility. The problem is she is only coming with that sort of 5 health, and her damage is pretty pitiful. At least Fifth Brother comes with that dice fixing with that ram on his lightsaber to get you on average up to around 4 or 5 PS1. Generally, Seventh Sister, unless you're doing some token stuff, she's probably pushing out maybe 3, sometimes 2 PS1. Yeah, it's just really bad. And again, you can use her as a melee blocker. She at least has the immune pierce, and she has that chance to maybe put a couple of wounds onto a big force user before they punch her back or they disengage. So yeah, it's not terrible, and she does at least have better action economy, which is nice. But again, you've got 2 training slots and a 4 slot, so again, she's probably pushing like 120, 125 points, and she doesn't do enough for that 120 or 125 points. And she, like, the fact that Ahsoka and Ventress are 5 points more and just do so much more for their points, like, compare her to either of those and she's just so much worse. Like, yeah, it's an obvious comparison, but yeah, it's a bit sad. The thrown lightsaber, I don't understand this. Like, neither of them have relentless, so I don't see how this fits into the picture really. And don't get me wrong, it's a nice utility occasionally to have, but it should never be relevant. Like, if you are stopping anywhere within range 2 to throw the lightsaber, especially if units have yet to activate, this is not it. And a lot of the time after cover, and even if they have 1 dodge, you might be doing 1 PS1 for a whole action. Really, no. Yeah, it's so poor. And the one advantage she does have, at least over Fifth Brother, is she has more options in terms of command cards, but I don't necessarily know if they're like better. Her 1-pip's interesting, at least, like the ability to gain tokens when you're defending is quite nice. And again, that will at least have that synergy with with Fifth Brother as well. So there's something there, maybe. Like, the fact that this is a 1-pip that does order 2 units is fairly good, and getting that pseudo danger sense as well isn't bad. The problem is that you are not going to have control over when this triggers. So this is not a proactive thing, this is a reactive thing. And ultimately, neither the Fifth Brother or the Seventh Sister are impactful enough, unless they're somehow the only unit tagging an objective that your opponent can kill, that there's any point attacking her. So yes, you play this 1-pip, but then ultimately they probably just won't attack you, and then it won't have any effect. So yeah, it's a situational 1-pip, but at least it does order 2 units. The 2-pip, at least you get a recover on this, and then if you're going after a hero, so commander or operative, you can grab some aims, which again gives dodges, which is a decent setup. The advantage with this one is at least it's more proactive. Like, this is something you have control over, and attacking a commander or an operative isn't ridiculously hard. It's something that is quite feasible. I mean, again, if you're tied up in melee by something else, you haven't really got a natural way to escape. So yeah, but I think this is better than the 1-pip because at least you have control over what it's doing. And then the 3-pip, Demoralize 1, isn't terrible. It's worth noting that range 1 disc is not great, and the fact they also have to be suppressed. Yeah, it's like, I think they could have made this sort of restrictions on these so much broader. Like, this, I think this could be range 2 and it would still be absolutely fine. I don't even know if it has to be suppressed. Like, spending an aim token, and it's not even that they lose 2 dice, it's that they lose 1 dice. So yeah, man, like, I think there are some cool effects going on here, which is why I think I've rated both of them fairly high for theme, in that they're both A tier. But yeah, in terms of the actual power, the power level for both of them is dreadful. So that's why they're both down in that D tier. Will puts Seventh Sister above Fifth Brother at least. Like, I'm not going to do that severely. Moving on to Shadow Collective, and it's going to be Maul Arrival. He's 150 points, and that's his only real issue, I think, actually. I think everything else, I think theme-wise, he's pretty good. His command cards are fun. He can do solid damage, especially if you're bringing the Darksaber. Like, that makes you that bit more consistent with that surge to crit. But, you know, this is 35 points more than Ventress and Ahsoka, and I'm going to keep using them as a benchmark because I feel like they're both really solid examples. In Ventress's case, a really good example of what a Force user can offer in like a competitive sense, and Maul just isn't there. He's not completely unusable, but I think you could easily bring him down to like 130, 125, even 120 if you wanted to, and it would still be absolutely fine. Like, I don't understand how you're supposed to squeeze him into a list of 150 points. So yeah, fundamentally, like, there are loads of different things I could talk about here in terms of like Maul's issues, but I think his fundamental issue is he's just really overcosted. I think his abilities are fine. Yeah, he has decent synergy in the list. Obviously, there's Rookcast and apparently Savage Press coming soon. So again, that might add another more compelling reason to take Maul. So yeah, he's just fine. Like, he's not that different to his Separatist form, and the Separatist form has a similar issue. So it's there's not many problems here. I really like the sort of the wound one here is nice. Not having it attached to a command card just gives you that bit more flexibility. Geomastery is obviously great. The fact you can't triple move is a bit sad. I do think that restriction could be lifted, given that both versions of Maul are still quite weak. And Deflect inbuilt is great, just gives you that bit more survivability if you do kind of misposition or get caught out. So yeah, surges are never bad. And then you've got plenty of options, like the command slot's nice. It would be good, I think, if you had an additional training slot. But that's quite a common pattern for Force users. Like, when they do get given that command slot, they generally lose their training slot. In terms of his command cards, his sort of obviously doesn't count as the same number of pips, so you're treating this as a 1-pip when you're building, but it's actually a 3-pip. The ability to remove wounds is nice. I think this is a weird one because by the time you're playing this, it's probably quite late on in the game, and you would value this more as a 1-pip. The fact that it's a 3-pip that only orders Maul isn't great. I almost feel like this should have some kind of like divulge effect on it. This feels like the kind of card that, I don't know how that would work, but it feels like it should have some kind of divulge effect on it. But I think this is probably the weakest of his three, just because generally in this game, as I've spoken before, it's quite hard to be wounded and not dead, because if you're close to dying, people generally have access to ways to kind of get you across the line. So sometimes this will be useful, but I wouldn't bring this one a lot of the time. His Eminence, in the days when you needed a dodge token to activate Deflect, this was probably a bit more relevant, but it's still not terrible. Dunking a load of suppression on units around you, you know, it can be situationally quite good. It's obviously not as good as Vader's 3-pip, for instance, but the ability to not be suppressed or panicked for your action economy, and this includes Maul as well, because it's just an allied trooper unit, and he starts at range 1 of himself. So yeah, not being able to be suppressed or panicked is good. Probably not that strong, but often in Shadow Collective you don't have that wide an array of command cards anyway. You know, it's probably these or the generics, so this might be worth bringing just to avoid losing that action economy. And then his 3-pip, which is probably his best one, the ability to kind of, you know, share those tokens and continue to stack them as well. Probably like a turn 2 or turn 3 play if you have balled up in the center. You know, even if you only get like 2 additional aims off this, it's still fairly good. And getting surges is useful as well, because Maul doesn't surge either way unless you're taking the Darksaber. But you know, you can add this to Mando Super Commandos, for instance, who don't surge to hit. Like, that could be really useful. Your Pikes also don't surge to hit. Black Suns also don't surge to hit. So there are lots of units in Shadow Collective that could benefit from this. So probably the nicest of his 3, but none of these are super compelling in terms of reason to run Maul. And I think all the more reason to bring his cost down to maybe, I think less than 130 is probably the way to go, 125 or 120. I think he'd be a lot more reasonable. Moving up to the next one, and you never guess who it's going to be. It's going to be Separatist Maul, and same problems as before. Less severe here just because he is that bit cheaper, but I think Maul could be very, very similarly costed to Ventress and Ahsoka. Again, I think 115 would be absolutely fine for Maul. I don't really understand why he didn't come down in the same batch that they did, but again, maybe there's something going on behind the scene that we don't know. Unfortunately, with his Saber base, you're probably only on average pushing about 4 PS2, which is okay, but it's not like that special, and your lack of dice fixing is a bit problematic. You can get tokens off command cards, which is nice, but again, that's probably not like a long-term solution. Obviously, you want to be wounded, you can wound yourself off a command card, but again, then you're down to 5 health, and there's something about that difference between 5 health and 6 health, but you can sometimes just cling on like 1 HP with, you know, an Ahsoka or an Obi-Wan, for instance, like those units that have those dodge access and want to be at 6 health, that can just be really frustrating for your opponent to deal with, and 5 health just leave you vulnerable to like one bad roll in a way that 6 health just somehow doesn't feel like it does. But yeah, if you can get him wounded, his action economy is good. You know, you can move, and then it's a bit like having relentless if you're planning to attack, or you know, you can fit in a recover, for instance. You could recover, move. Like there are nice options. Saw somebody in a comment put like you can sometimes take force push on him because you can fit in a recover action because you have 3 to choose from. Like if Maul's stuck in melee, he actually then becomes one of the more efficient in terms of action economy because you got 3, you could, you know, feasibly dodge, aim, and attack, for instance, if you wanted to, or fit in a recover and an aim and an attack or something. Like there are more options. So yeah, I think Geo Mastery, it would be nice if you could triple move, and especially as I said before, as Maul isn't in the best space right now, I think that could be a good one. But essentially, I think he could just be fixed with a bit of a points drop. Like there's nothing else that really needs doing, in my opinion. In terms of his command cards, Duel the Fates, love this. Like disengage on a melee unit is always really nice, and especially if you know you've dived in and been tied up by something and you're not actually going to be able to finish it off, then you could move out and go for the target you want to, which is always really good. The fact they can't spend green tokens, good against Kenobi, which is an interesting little playoff. But you know, it's always going to be a nice thing to have, and I think this is a nice utility to have maybe the turn after you've dived and you want to kind of pick your targets a bit more. The Phantom Menace, I think it's quite rare you're actually going to play this as a command card, because I think you would want to play it a bit more early game. But you know, if you're holding an objective and you're worried about being sniped long range or something, it could be a reasonable utility. But you're playing this the Divulge effect, and getting Infiltrate on a Force user, as any Vader users will testify, is really crazy. And yeah, especially if you've got Burst of Speed, yeah, you can do some really nasty things with this. So a really nice combo to have. And finally, at last, getting double 1-pips on a Force user is really nice. This is your like aggro. This is the one when you're going all out for a bit of damage. Like getting an aim token and Jedi Hunter on his dice pool probably takes what's normally around 4 PS2, probably up to like 7 PS2 on average, which is really nice. And obviously you won't be getting that pierce against a Force user most of the time because they'll get that immune melee pierce. But being able to throw for 7 is really nice, as you know, Ventress users will testify. And this is how you can trigger your Geo Mastery as well. So a really nice utility. I think if you're bringing Maul, you probably bring all 3 of his command cards, unless you've got some real competition in that 1-pip slot, in which case you might be able to drop Duel of the Fates. But yeah, Phantom Menace is, I think, pretty much a must take just for that power of that Infiltrate. So yeah, slotting him right alongside his Shadow Collective version. He is better just because he's a bit cheaper, but I think hopefully we'll see a bit of a points drop for both of them. Moving on to the next unit in C tier, and it is going to be the Jedi Knight Operative for Republic. And again, the only real issue I can see here is the 5 health. I think everything else is absolutely fine. I think they have obviously access to a good range of doctrines, a good range of upgrades, a good range of trainings, a good range of sabers. Like yeah, they have really solid access. I just don't think the Jedi Knight quite does enough at the moment. But this is like very much upper end of C tier, lower end of B tier for me. I think like a Jedi Knight is rarely going to make your army that much worse. I think just currently doesn't maybe quite fit into the sort of Gar operative slot super well. I think in general, for me, probably the best way to run Gar, if you're taking operatives, is Bad Batch and Padme, just because I think they complement each other quite well. I think the Jedi Knight and Bad Batch don't necessarily complement each other quite as well. So not saying he's terrible at all, just I don't think he often makes lists better. Obviously, you're probably going to take the double-bladed saber most of the time, and yeah, it's a really solid one to have. And in terms of his training upgrade, if you can get access to Jedi Guardian, if you've not already taken it on a custom Jedi commander or something, then that's really useful. The ability to get lethal and already have charge, for your upgrade, where you're probably taking, Force Adept or Master Duelist as well. Yeah, you just have some really nice options in there, and I think he's fine. His command cards, same as the commanders, and if you really want access to those, this is obviously a cheaper way of getting them. And 85 points is not expensive. Like full kit, he's probably only coming in around like 110, 115. That's if you're going all out. I think probably 110 is maybe a bit closer to the mark. And yeah, he's a reasonably solid piece for that 110 points. That 5 health does worry me a bit, and I think at least he has inbuilt deflect, so if you do get caught off guard, then it's not so bad. You can also take, I think it's the peacekeeping mission training upgrade, which does give you that prepared position and the reliable 2. Reliable 2 is really nice, like getting those surges to block and surges to hit is really useful. So yeah, not terrible at all, probably just a little bit below average. In terms of the sort of command cards, I really rate the 1-pip. I think it just does exactly what you want a 1-pip for a Force user to do. Like, it's more powerful, I think, on the commander because you can stack more tappable upgrades to get value off that recover. But having an aim, having a dodge, having a standby, especially when you're likely to be in melee after you play this, it just feels like a really natural follow-up to that dive turn. And having played against this a few times now, it really does play out like that most of the time. And yeah, melee weapons with suppressive are quite rare, and the ability, unless you've got like a demoralizer or like a mind trick, for instance, which are a little bit niche these days, there's not really a natural way to knock it off, so you're probably getting an additional attack in there as well. So yeah, not bad at all. I think the 3-pip feels a bit weirder. Giving up a bit of your order control is okay, but it just doesn't feel like it does enough for giving up those orders, and especially when you give out those orders, it not having an effect. I just don't know how worth it is, but I think it does have a bit of flexibility, and the ability to remove suppression is always nice, so not a dreadful 3-pip, and probably worth taking over a generic assault, unless you really need those orders going on like a vehicle or something. But yeah, just not the flashiest 3-pip in the world, but definitely the 1-pip is a really nice utility to have. And I think the Jedi Knight could also justifiably be at the bottom of B tier, but for me, I'm just going to put him at the top of C tier for now, just that bit below average. Coming up next, we have got young Ahsoka, and this is now moving into B tier, so this is units that I don't think make armies worse necessarily, they just possibly don't make them better. The real benefits of Ahsoka are in her mobility and in her kind of action economy, essentially. So that Scout 1 is great, especially when you've got Speed 3 base, like as I've said here at the bottom. The fact you can go Scout 1 into Speed 3 with Jump 2 as well, that is so much flexibility early and so much ability to kind of pick the area of the battle you want to be fighting in. Like, you don't need, the scouting party from Rex and things like that to jump you further forward. You just have all that mobility ready to go. She's obviously got Deflect, Immune Pierce, both really nice. Independent Recover is great, and you can line up a few tappable abilities. You could have like Offensive Push and, I don't know, Reflexes or something if you wanted it. And then you've also got a command slot in there as well, which is nice. The Associate Anakin Skywalker, are you really running 3 commanders? I mean, maybe if you're doing, this allows you at least to do Rex, Anakin, Ahsoka, which is nice in terms of theme, so not bad. And then Sheen Mastery is basically just an upgrade over Deflect. Think of it as old Deflect, so basically any surges convert to wounds, not just, being capped at 1 if you roll any surges. So can be a nice deterrent, and especially if you're being attacked by kind of, I'm thinking Mandos here essentially, or, a ranged attack from a Force user or something. It can just be a little bit of a deterrent, because there will just be times when you rip 2 or 3 surges and your opponent will lose like half of their unit, for instance, just because got that little bit of luck going on those red defense dice. So it's a really nice thing to have and can just be a little bit of a deterrent. 110 points. I think it's she doesn't feel on the same level as kind of her older form and Ventress. I think Speed 3 base is really nice, and don't sleep on that, but She doesn't have charge baked in, and while you can get it off a command card, again, that is a little bit telegraphed. So again, doesn't compare super favorably to Ventress and Ahsoka in that regard with that kind of action economy. But yeah, it's not bad. And I think what that extra speed does allow you to do is get you into a position where maybe you only need one speed 3 move to get there. And especially with that jump too, you can maybe hide behind some terrain that other units don't have access to, and then just jump out and be able to take those fights kind of when you want to. In terms of her command cards, I kind of rate her 1-pip, like the ability to kind of chain off killing an initial unit can be really nice. Also getting charge baked in is really good. Like, this is what you would want the 1-pip to do, I think. It basically just lets you, if you kill a unit, you can then make another attack action, and that free move action when you also have charge is really good. This feels weirdly like Jin's 1-pip, except on a much better unit. So yeah, can kind of see why this is more compelling on Ahsoka compared to Jin. And especially when her sabers are like fairly decent. The lack of Pierce does reduce your consistency quite a lot. I think you really notice the dip from PS2 to PS1 when sometimes it does just, it's a cliche to say, but it does just let a unit survive on 1 wound, and that can be super frustrating, like especially when you're relying on this 1-pip kind of chaining things together. If you don't quite finish off that unit, it can just be really frustrating, and especially when there's like a bonus for your opponent if you're not able to finish them off with this command card, it can be a bit of a coin flip in that regard. So yeah, and coupled with the fact that this dice pool is not very consistent at all, like you don't have those red dice to kind of anchor your roll, and you can normally rely on those to be fairly secure. Like, yes, most of the time I think you probably push for like 4.5 with this, which is pretty good with that surge to crit. But 4.5, 5 PS1 into a red saving unit is probably only good for like 3 or 4 wounds, which means if it's an upgraded core squad, like, Clones or Empire, for instance, you're really going to struggle to finish them off. And the same with, even like a rebel unit. Like, if you've got a rebel trooper unit that's double moved into you, most of the time you're not going to kill them just because they'll be able to dodge 2, and then, yes, you've got 3 PS1, but that still leaves 1 dude alive. So it's where just that kind of lack of pierce and that lack of maybe consistency and dice fixing on the pool can be a bit tough. Revenge is not the Jedi way, so a 4-pip that does order 2 units, which is pretty nice. If you do want a bit of order control turn 1, this can be okay. Ahsoka getting 3 dodges is decent. The Jarkai Mastery and the Sheen, like, if you're playing this turn 1 just for the order control, I don't hate it. Giving up a command card, like, especially when you're playing standing orders anyway, like, it doesn't actually change. You still have 5 command cards left over, so yeah, this should be absolutely fine. And then her 3-pip, I go where I'm needed. Yeah, like, you can make a free speed 3 move. I don't think you can jump off this just because it's a speed 3 move, not a move action. And then, Guardian 3, Disengage, Courage, like, this just feels like a whole load of stuff that they kind of threw together on a command card, and I don't know, it doesn't feel like it does enough. Like, is this better than Assault? Probably. Like, is this net positive? Yeah, like, you like Guardian 3 and a bit of Courage, so yeah, you probably take this over Assault, but again, just feels a bit weird as to, like, what this effect actually does. So yeah, Ahsoka right at the bottom of B tier, but I don't think is often going to make a list significantly worse. Next one is going to be Commander Luke, and this is the first time I've talked about him properly since that dreadful video I made like 15 minutes before he got nerfed, but he still does the same things, he just doesn't have access to the cool command cards anymore, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, he's just a tough melee blocker. Getting access to block can be, it's not like better or worse necessarily than deflect as long as you've got good dodge access, which Luke does. You can also take prepared supplies in his gear slot, which is something I would always recommend doing. And then, yeah, normally in your force slot, you're probably taking burst of speed. But obviously you can take a reflexes if you feel the need for extra dodges. You're not running Luke for his damage. Most of the time he's pushing like 3 and a bit PS1. And so obviously, if you summon a Skywalker, it's 7 PS2, which is probably worse than like a base Anakin or Vader swing once they get their PS3 off. So yeah, like, he's not a damage dealer. He's just a fairly cheap unit that can absorb damage from a Force user really effectively, and in that role he still does it. He just doesn't have access to I'm a Jedi anymore, which is probably fair because it was not like oppressive, but I could see why it was a bit weird that you had this like 120, 130 point unit that could just run around and shut down big Force users, or a large clone core squad or something for a turn. So yeah, it's fine, but just feels a bit bad. Inspire 2 is decent, and a Courage 3 bubble is also really nice. I think until they make Leia Courage 3, this is a really compelling reason to run Luke, apart from, you could take the custom officer now who can get to Courage 3, but it's just a really nice utility to have, and especially when there are, like, panicking is quite relevant in the game now, removing that kind of becoming so much of an issue, like having to get above 6 courage, 6 suppression rather than above 4 suppression is kind of a big deal if Luke's hanging around, so a nice thing to have. His pistol is also decent, like getting PS1 baked in is quite nice, and long shot is not nothing. It would feel really bad, I think, just to take an aim shoot with Luke on a turn, but you probably then do like 2, maybe 3 PS1 with sharpshooter at range 3. It's in a pinch, it's fine, but it's not really what you want to be doing. Main thing about Luke, though, is to talk about his command cards. So, Son of Skywalker I've talked about, you basically get to attack twice. He has a mediocre dice pool, occasionally you'll high roll and push like 5 PS1, but even then that's like worse than, Fleet's base, for instance, so it's not that scary, but doing it twice is nice, and it is something you're probably going to bring when you're running Luke, just because it does feel good, and Luke's a bit order hungry, so yeah, it's fine, but better on the operative version, obviously. My ally is the Force. This is the first of his kind of dodge access cards, and Rebels love dodges. It's a mediocre effect, it's a mediocre command card, but if you're bringing Luke, you're probably going to bring this along, just because it's a nice thing to have. Full of surprises. If you're engaged with a Force user and you want to become a bit more survivable and get a dodge token, it's good. I wouldn't bring it. Yeah, it's just not it really. Like spending a whole 2 pip to get a dodge and roll probably 2 or 3 extra white dice in defense. Like, yes, it might keep Luke alive, but that's not going to win you the game. So take something else, do something a bit cooler. Yeah, this is not a great command card. And then Return of the Jedi, up there for just, again, one of the most mediocre command cards in the game. He gets a dodge, which is nice, and you can remove 1 suppression from a load of allied troop units at range 3. If you hit like 2 or 3 suppression, this feels alright, but yeah, this is just not it. His command cards need to be cooler. The fact that they restricted his access, which I understand, but they're still just so underwhelming, just feels really bad, and I think is a genuine weakness of Luke's, just how none of these command cards are impactful, really, and none of them are really going to help you change a game. If you compare them to... It's a tricky comparison, because I was about to say Vader, but Vader has some bonkers command cards, but yeah, this is just... It feels really underwhelming for Luke to kind of have access to this range of command cards. Moving up to the custom Jedi Commander, and I think this is kind of the definition of just a really average Force user, and that's not to like insult him at all. Like the fact it's a custom unit, and I think it is legitimately better than quite a few like named characters, I think is actually a bit of a compliment. So the upgrades compared to the Jedi Knight basic are: you get Master of the Force 1, which is really nice. You get an extra health, which is really nice. You get an extra courage, which is really nice. And you get access to extra slots and an extra doctrine as well. All of which are really nice options to have. Is all that worth 20 points? I'm going to argue yes, but I think this is one of the things that I kind of spoke about earlier with the Jedi Knight, is that the Jedi Knight is genuinely cheap, whereas the Jedi Knight General, once you've upgraded, is probably going to come in around kind of 140, 145, which is, competing, well, not competing directly, but in that kind of budget Force user territory, but not like crazy cheap. Compared to like the Jedi Knight, who's genuinely very cheap, I think this guy can actually become like that sort of cheap to kind of mid-range Force user. You're probably going to take double-bladed saber most of the time, just because it does give you that baked-in charge, which is a really nice thing to have. And yeah, I think you probably most of the time are equipping fairly similar to the Jedi Knight. It's just this just gives you more power and a couple of extra options, which is quite nice. I think General of the Republic, which is the one that he gets access to, the Jedi operative doesn't. I don't know if it's necessarily the one to take, but getting a command slot, getting direct clone trooper, and bolster 2 are all really nice. Like, it all fits, I think, quite nicely together. And then you can also just, run that double-bladed lightsaber, and then you can also take, I mean, if you're going full support, you could also take Jedi Training Acumen, for instance. Like, that could be, if you're running a genuine support build, though, it probably starts to add up quite quickly. Like, running 130, 140 point for a full support build probably isn't super strong. But, we used to do that with Yoda when he was a bit more expensive, although you could then support kind of significantly more powerful units that also have better action economy in Bad Batch. So probably not the way to go, but yeah, I think he's just a very solid middle of the road force user, and kind of already spoken about the command cards. I think the 1-pip's pretty solid. I think the 3-pip's a bit underwhelming, but absolutely fine. And I think I've summed it up at the bottom here. Like, he's not super flashy, but he'll do the job most of the time, and I think it's a bit tricky to kind of speak about the role he's going to take when he is so customizable. Like, you can build some quite genuinely damage outputting builds that will generally push out, 5 PS2 fairly consistently if you take the tactical upgrades and the charge upgrades, or you can build him more passively to kind of be more of that supportive build, and he'll do that role just as well. Speaking of support builds, next up is going to be Yoda, who's in a really weird spot. I can't tell if he's good or if he's bad. I think he's not great. But I don't think he often, as I've said, like, the criteria for kind of beta is not making lists worse, and I don't think he does. He's got a good mastery, he's got inbuilt deflects, he's got Master Force 2, which is great. Like, all of those feel so appropriate. The weakness is that 5 health, which even with surges, as anyone who plays like Mandos, for instance, will testify, it does just feel a little bit like that extra 1 HP that Dooku gets, for instance, despite having, the same defensive profile. It does just buy you that ability to have that one dreadful defense roll. Whereas all it takes is a little bit of chip damage on Yoda, and then suddenly, like, as soon as he's down to like 3 health, you have to kind of feel like you're wrapping him a bit in cotton wool, because he can just be, only takes 1 dodgy roll. Like, even if you got hit for 6, suddenly it's starting to feel a little bit worrying that 1 dodgy roll could come through. Maybe, like, if you're really cagey about it, you run like Clairvoyance, but I think that feels a little bit bad, especially when you won't be using Clairvoyance offensively, because his dice pool's just really consistent with those 4 red surge to crit. So yeah, that might just be a bit too passive. As I said here, he's kind of supportive with that Guidance Trooper. He's kind of damage dealing with his command cards and the fact he can attack twice, which is really decent. But yeah, he used to really thrive off the sort of Bad Batch thing where you could, guidance them into a move and then they could do a steady shot and stuff like that. But since they removed that, he just doesn't quite have the same kind of, he doesn't have much going on. Like, you could guidance Anakin to do an attack, which is better than his attack, I guess. So there's a combo there, but then you have to have them quite close together. And then you're spending, probably about 350, 370 points on that combo, which again feels a bit crazy. His command cards are amazing. I think they are some of the most fun and impactful command cards in the game, just because of the way they just reappear. Like, it's such a cool mechanic, and it's really fun, and I love that they kept it in the game. They didn't mess around with it in the update. I think that's a really cool thing to have. And finally, before I talk about his command cards, I think that Courage 4 bubble is really nice, and again, just makes it that bit harder in a faction that already is not like immune suppression, but doesn't worry about suppression that much. That Courage 4 just gives you that, you don't have to worry really about suppression really and about panicking, because stacking up 8 suppression to make a unit panic when it's near to Yoda is a big deal, and I think that feels really good. His command cards, so size matters not, the jump 1, the charge, the disengage, and he gets maximum speed of 3, especially when he's a base speed of 1. That is really nice. The ability to do either his normal actions or his free actions twice is really good, and getting, obviously, there is no try back into your hand is really useful. Like, this is probably the turn after you dive with there is no try, so normally the combo is you probably Luminous Beings either turn 1 or turn 2. You then there is no try the turn after, you then size matters not the turn after, and then you just repeat that cycle, which is really nice. Used to be more relevant when there was an extra turn in the game. It's a bit less relevant now because you're not often running shorts of command cards, but any of these are really nice to play. So yeah, the fact it brings back there is no try is super nice. There is no try, outmaneuver, relentless, you get dodge base. This used to be more relevant when you had to trigger deflect, but not relevant anymore because you get it baked in now and he already surges to defend, so all really good. Luminous Beings a wee back is also really good, and Relentless. He does have Force Wave, I think it's called, yeah, which is a solid ability. And if you're stuck, you need to stay on an objective, and you just want to do something. It's also suppressive, which is nice, and removing cover. Like you probably hit for 2 or 3, and then you probably only do 1 wound, but you're not doing this for the damage. You're doing this for the suppression. So yeah, not bad at all. And finally, Luminous Beings are we just, get those tokens, start the turn, and then other units can share them, which is really nice. Generally, this is, you probably move Yoda onto the board fairly early if you've got long-range units, I don't know, ARFs or a tank or whatever. Being able to share those tokens is super nice. So yeah, just a really nice combo of command cards. I think if you're bringing Yoda, you bring all 3, and then you can just situationally play whichever one you need. But as I say, it's normally that Luminous Beings into There Is No Try, into Size Matters Not, and that combo will serve you pretty well. Moving up to Operative Luke. So this is getting towards the top of B tier now, and I think Operative Luke is he's an example of a unit not getting worse, but other units getting better, causing him to get worse as a result. He is, when you have Force Push on him, he's one of the most fun and tricky objective players in the game, and I don't think it's that close. He is so difficult to pin down. The disengage and the Force Push combo means that you'd have to have like 2 units on him, and they'd have to both be quite healthy, because he also has a pretty decent saber swing on him too. So yeah, it's really nice, and the 7 health is great. That it again just takes you up that next level above that 6 health, which just makes him that much harder to kill. Especially if you get a couple of decent defense rolls early when you're first attacked, it can just feel a bit crushing for your opponent because you have to get through 7 health, which is a big deal. The problem for Luke is, though, that in order to be effective, he does realistically need Force Push, which already puts him up to 205. If you then take a couple of force abilities, a burst and a mind trick, say, that pushes him to 220. With a training, he's probably up to 225, which is more expensive than like some Vader and Anakin builds, depending on whether or not they bring Force Push. So that's the tricky bit, is that so many of your points are going to be invested in Luke, and at 225, he's going to be probably 80 or 90 more than Ahsoka full kit, which probably costs you 2 acts in Rebels, which, switching from, say, 13 down to 11 is a huge deal now when so many people are coming in around 12. So that is a real weakness of Luke, is he is just a bit expensive, and I do wonder if he could come down a few points. I'm not saying he needs to, because I think Rebels are in a good spot, and I think Luke isn't necessarily a bad unit, but if we wanted him to be that bit more competitive, like, should he be 50 more than Ahsoka and Sabine? I don't really know. The other problem for Luke is that the Rebel operative slot is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, there are so many good options. I think you could argue it's the most competitive slot in the game right now. What else is better? Separatist Heavy, maybe, is the only other slot that's comparable. Yeah. Anyway, it's just insanely strong. And Bad Batch are better. Din's probably better. I think Ahsoka and Sabine are both better. Like, Jin is insanely cheap and really good value. Even the basic operative now is like a decent option. Like, there are just so many things in there, and I think Luke is kind of struggling to find his niche. So he is super fun. You will enjoy using him, but it is very tricky to win games with him, would be my perspective on it, which is why I'm putting him a power level of B. I think in the right hands, he still probably is an A tier, but I think for the majority of players, his power level is still a B. And moving on to the final unit in B tier, so this is right at the top of B tier, it's going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think Obi-Wan, similar to the generic commander, is just like the definition of a really solid to, in this case, I think slightly above average force user. He just offers so much consistency with his mastery, and the ability to take wounds onto himself is always useful, because if you've got units that you need to survive, that Obi-Wan can help with that, especially if he's a bit healthy. That's really good. Being able to control where that damage goes a bit more is really nice. He's obviously immune pierce, he's got the charge, he's inbuilt deflect, like all of it's really nice. He also has decent command cards, the ability to generate those tokens, give them to other units as well with General Kenobi with those surges is really nice. A really good like turn 2 play, for instance, is where I'd see that coming in. His saber is underwhelming. It's just a worse version of Ahsoka's, and often you'll be charging in for like, as I said, like 3.5 PS2, which is okay. But yeah, nothing super special. And also worth noting, like that's not really what you're running Obi-Wan for. Like that's not like a relevant thing. So I wouldn't get too tied up in his lack of damage necessarily. Also, memes were always there with Obi-Wan. Literally, hello there is one of his command cards. So I really like his theme. I think he is a really good example of a unit that feels exactly how it should in the game, and I love that. So really glad he's in the game. He's not super powerful, but he feels a good level of power, and he's not often going to make an army worse by being included in it. Hello there. So this is his 1-pip, nimble, bunch of aims, dodges, standbys, whatever you want. Like, it's great. People will try and avoid attacking him this turn just because he's going to be so difficult to kill. So yeah, if you're objective playing in the late game, this is really nice. And you get an aim to fix those dice as well, and one surge is always useful in melee. Like, there are so many things here that are just really useful. So yeah, love this one, and it's a perfectly valid 1-pip. Knowledge and defense, if you really need to absorb some damage, this is the turn to go for it. And the fact you can Guardian melee as well, if a unit gets tied up, that could be really useful. I see this as like kind of a mid-game play, like a turn 3, turn 4, if you're surrounded by units that don't really want to be in melee that he needs to try and save. And then I've spoken about General Kenobi with, it's a generic 3-pip. It gives out 3 orders, and you can get a bunch of surges, which is super nice. You can play this turn 1. Standing orders is still the best turn 1 play in the game, and this is close, but I don't think it merits it. And another thing worth noting is this is a really strong effect to have when you're actually being attacked more consistently. And I think as a result, while having all those surges turn 1 is super nice, you maybe won't get the most value from them. So if you do play this, say, turn 2, when you're more likely to be attacked, having those surges to share, and when you're also more likely to be attacking, having those surges is just better at that point. So this is probably a turn 2 rather than a turn 1 play. But yeah, that's B tier, and I think while these units aren't necessarily like interchangeable, I think they are all definitely I think they merit being in this kind of mid tier. I think this kind of criteria of not making an army better or worse strictly, they're just kind of like average, I think kind of applies to all of these units. Moving up to A tier, and it is going to be Ahsoka, the older version, so Ahsoka Fulcrum. I think she's great. I think she is so consistent, and I think she offers just so much for her points. Like, the value is excellent. 115 points. You've got her Jarkai Mastery. You've got Jump 2. You've got Charge. You've got Inbuilt Deflect. You've got really good sabers. Well, not really good. You've got pretty good sabers with that Surge to Crit, which is really nice if you're hitting into armor. It's great. And you've also got the Sabine Synergy 2-pip, which I've spoken about a load. I continue to run that combo just because I think it is really fun. And yeah, I think her theme is solid. I think her power level's really decent. I think you could make an argument for her being at the top of B tier, but for me, I think she just pushes over that edge just because she is so cheap at 115 points. Her command cards are also really decent. 1-pip is great if you're not tied up in melee. I think if you are, it's a bit underwhelming. But if it's late game and you're planning to charge onto an objective and you really need like a good 1-pip to add a bit of damage to your dice pool, I think it's really nice. The free recover off her 3-pip is super nice. I think I tend to take offensive push and reflexes. Getting both of those back is really nice, especially when you can then add those dodges to your dice pool. Her 2-pip's underwhelming, but don't bring it. It's fine, just leave it at home. Personally, I'd like to see her given a few more support abilities, possibly tie it to that 2-pip, give her the ability to get a dodge as well when she uses Guardian or something, like just something a little bit extra, because currently it just doesn't feel super compelling. And again, 2-pips that only order the unit they're ordering need to be like really compelling, and she just currently, that 2-pip isn't really compelling, so yeah, not for me. She's 140-ish. points, which is great. Like when after upgrades, 140 points is amazing. So yeah, that feels really good. And defend 1, she's a bit order hungry, so the fact that she gets it when she's ordered, I think it's much better than Ventress's, because independent defend 1 is great if you have like other things that obviously need orders preferentially, but there will be times when your big force user is going to need an order, and on that turn I think I'd rather have the dodges than in the sort of previous turns when she's less order hungry. Moving over to the next unit in A tier, and that is going to be General Grievous. He's just efficient. He's tough, and he can tie up units. He can survive being in melee with units. He's got a versatile gun, so if you don't attack the unit you want to be in with, he can do that. I think it's great, and he offers a lot for 130 points. And yes, he can die, but only really if you really chuck him in aggressively, or if he really gets focused down. And again, if he really gets focused down, you're probably okay with that, so I think it's fine. His one small weakness is that courage 2, and with no inherent like courage fixing, like he doesn't get the recovers and things like that some other force users get on their cards. So the most common way to actually deal with him, I guess, is probably just to shoot him before he gets into melee. And if you can rob him of an action, that does feel pretty good, even though he does still get relentless. So like if you can do a move and a shoot off him, things like that, still feels pretty good. His Jedi Hunter is nice. I think there aren't, in my experience, a huge number of force users around at the moment, and being able to get to them can be a bit tricky. So yeah, while he can kind of hold his own against force users, that Jedi Hunter is probably like a nice bonus rather than compelling reason to run him. Scale's good. I found out the other day that it's like better unhindered, so that's really decent. I thought it was only a climbing thing, but it turns out that's super nice. His sabers are nice. That critical 1 is huge on a unit that doesn't naturally surge. Like on average, you should only roll 1 surge on this dice pool anyway, so getting that extra hit like for free essentially is super nice. Might take your dice pool from like 4 and a bit to 5 and a bit, for instance, which feels really good. So love that. And the Annihilator is great. Like the fact it gets the crit 1 and the pierce is just really decent, and obviously that versatile gives you so many options. Entourage Magners, you're never gonna be mad with this. Like they want to be close to you anyway to get their retinue, so that's really good. And his command cards are all fairly decent. I think his 1 pip is probably the one you're always going to be bringing, like just for that, either on your dive turn or after your dive turn. This is great. Like that sort of that AoE thing, basically, like that whirly bird 2 pip from Boba is super nice. And the fact you can make normal attacks on top of this as well is great. Like this can just feel like such a lot to deal with sometimes if your opponent like positions incorrectly, so that's super nice. Supreme Commander, Ruthless is amazing, especially when you have, if you've got like B2s, for instance, and it means you don't have to sacrifice a unit to get that Ruthless off, I think is great. And the surges are fine. Like, yeah, not the most compelling thing. And I think, again, this is kind of the second strongest of his command cards. Crush Them does feel pretty weak. Like, I'm trying to think of the situation where you'd want to play this. If you had like a very good turn 1 and you got a couple of surges, maybe, but yeah, I think you can leave this one at home most of the time and it's not much of a loss. Although it does order Grievous and 2 units, so maybe again it's just a slightly better assault, but again, probably not something you want to be bringing that often. Next up is going to be Operative Vader, and this is no hate on the unit. The unit itself is perfectly good. Nothing wrong with this at all. Problem is he's not Commander Vader, and that means that basically in order to take Operative Vader, you have to not take Commander Vader, and that's why I think Operative Vader is like slightly lower rated than he otherwise would be. But he does have some upsides over his Commander version. Obviously, the Jedi Hunter's nice for that. Maybe you often, on Vader's dice pool, will see at least 1 surge. So you do, while your dice pool is smaller, it might offer you just that little bit more like consistency in terms of that surge conversion. Master Force 1 still there is great. Relentless is obviously still great as well. Like all that stuff that Vader has base. The fact you get access to training slots is really good. Often you'll see like a tenacity and Into the Fray, for instance, would be quite a likely combination. Even like mission objective, if you're planning to be close to objectives, is nice as well. The loss of a force slot does feel pretty bad. So you're then, I don't know what combination you then go for. Burst of speed isn't as necessary because you are that little bit quicker. So you could even go for like a choke and a saber throw, for instance. Like that's not the worst idea. But I do think it's quite hard to leave burst of speed at home, especially with that speed 2, which means you can actually move the turn after you burst of speed, which is pretty nice. And then force throw, scatter is decent, and got that relentless baked in, so it does mean that if you're kind of like passing a unit by or something, you could like knock them out of cover, and that could be super nice for the rest of your units to kind of attack them. Yeah. His main like features are his command cards, essentially. Like, this is a slightly cheaper, only 15 points cheaper, so probably not worth it, but slightly cheaper way to get access to the best suite of command cards in the entire game on any character. Basically, I think I'll do one big review on these now and then just won't go over it again for Commander Vader. So I'll probably talk about Commander Vader later on, but just won't review his command cards in as much detail. Implacable is ridiculous, so good, and especially if you're taking Tenacity on your Operative Vader, a way to trigger that, and then, you might do your initial swing at 5 PS3, and then you can do your second swing at 6 PS3, and that's crazy. That's so strong. So, yeah, feels really good, and I think up there for most impactful command cards in the game in the right situation. Vader's Might, if you're not bringing Force Push, I think this is a must. If you are bringing Force Push, this is less of a must, but still feels really decent. It's basically just a Force Push effect that can hit a wider variety of things. So it can't hit heavies, but it can hit everything else. So normally you can only hit troopers with this. So you could obviously hit things that aren't troopers. So speeder bikes, for instance, can be really fun. Yeah, it's just a really strong effect, and having something that's like Force Push, even if you already have it, can be really nice. Fear and Dead Men, this is the weakest of his command cards for me. I don't think this is always a must, especially when you have access to such a good generic 2-pip in Empire, which I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called like Pin Them Down or something, the one that shovels order tokens back on supports. But yeah, I think this is just not one I often see myself bringing. So this is still perfectly valid. Like, if you're trapped with a high value unit, then dealing damage back when they damage you can be really decent. But yeah, probably not one you often want to be bringing. New ways to motivate them. This is fine. The fact that this doesn't encourage you to order Vader is a little bit tricky, although most of the time you can. Obviously, the combo, Dewbacks, Din, whatever. The ability to just take an extra action for a wound is great, especially if you're playing to proc Tenacity. So this, most of the time, is coming along as well. Free actions are always good. Darkness Descends. Either way, this is insanely powerful. The Infiltrate is 95% of the time the way to go, I would say. Just because, as I've said before, think of this as like Scout 3, basically, giving your Vader Scout 3. And that's basically a free turn of movement, and a free turn of movement means you're a turn of movement closer, which means you're likely to get another turn of attacking. That's why this is so strong, and yeah, it just pins your opponent back. Like, they either basically move far enough forward that you are going to attack them, in which case, great, you get to deal extra damage, or they sit far enough back, in which case it's bought you space, in which case that's great. Either way, it's fantastic. It is crazy that getting Reliable 2, which is so powerful on both forms of Vader, it's very rarely taken, but that's just how powerful Infiltrate on Vader is. And then Master of Evil, this can single-handedly win you bring them to heal if played correctly. This is such a big deal against some lists. As a Rebel player, this can be absolutely crushing. Like, this can not only sometimes mess up one turn, it can sometimes mess up the turn after. Like, if you've got Rebel troopers and you have 3 suppression on them and you don't roll any of them off, you then panic, so then you only get rid of 1, you go down to 2. There's no guarantee you're going to get it off the turn after either. This can rob 2 entire turns from some units in some situations. Like, it's so powerful. Yeah, it's great. And the fact it also, gets Order 3 units and Vader, that's exactly what you'd be doing with Assault anyway, so this is, again, a must bring for me. Moving up to the next unit in A tier, it is going to be Count Dooku. Now, Dooku is an extremely powerful unit. However, Dooku is also a very expensive unit that doesn't have Charge or Relentless. And while he can get access to those from his command cards, that is still a weakness. But everything else for Dooku is just insane. Yeah, Cunning is fantastic. Like, it's just something you're always going to want to use. And if you don't want to have the risk of cunning going off, just play standing orders because it doesn't count because it's only Dooku's cards that count for this. But the fact on your one pip turn, you can nearly always guarantee to go first unless you're against, I don't know, Han or Krennic, for instance. It's just fantastic. Inbuilt deflect, he surges to block anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much, but it's always nice. Direct trooper unit, he can direct himself, he can start a B1 chain, all fantastic. Immune pierce, obviously. Makashi, amazing against force users, amazing against, like, I've been running a bit of Mando resistance recently, so that makes his damage so much better against them. And finally, Master the Force 2, in case you needed anything else sprinkled on top. You can take a choke, you can take a push, you can take burst of speed. Obviously, it doesn't proc from Master of the Force, but it's a really nice thing to have. Yeah, it's just fantastic. His lightsaber is good. It's not amazing. Generally, you're good for 4 PS2, but with Makashi, that can just be, well, 4 PS1, but against high value targets, that's great. And then Force Lightning. Whoever upgraded this to 6 black was pretty brave, but I kind of respect it in a way. Scatter's nice, Suppressive's nice, PS1's nice. Generally, this is good for around 4 PS1. You might lose one to cover, but even then, like 3 PS1 with Scatter and Suppressive is really nice, especially on that 1 pip turn. It's just a great package. It just fits together super well. He's Courage 3, he's got 6 health with the red surging saves and immune pierce. Like, he's so tough, he's so difficult to deal with. Yeah, he's just great. He's just slightly too expensive, but he's not that expensive. Like, I'm not saying he should be reduced at all. It's just the only thing stopping him from being in S tier was if he was like 155 points, for instance. That would be the only thing, because you do have to make sacrifices to bring Dooku, but he nearly always is going to pay off. So yeah, feels really good, and I think especially with his command cards being as strong as they are, like, so his 1 pip getting that Arsenal 2 and Relentless just feels so good and versatile in case for whatever reason you got stuck. Like, throwing 5 red and 6 black with PS3 and all that cool stuff, it just feels so good. So yeah, it's just great. And the extra suppression, just amazing as well. It just fits together so well. And when you're guaranteeing to go first with this as well, with your cunning, well, not guaranteeing, most of the time you are. Yeah, it's great. Double the Fall, it's another really solid one to have. It basically means that you can shuffle, and it's like, is it Spliced Comms, the new thing for the custom super tactical droid? But yeah, just being able to choose to lose Dooku's token in favor of 2 enemy ones is often a really decent trade. Maybe this is played after your dive turn on the 1 pip, so I don't play Dooku, but when I've played against him, you see the 1 pip dive and then into the sort of 2 pip to shuffle them both back into the bag. And then finally, you disappoint me. That speed 2 move can sometimes be pretty crushing. It's like super force push, and it can occasionally drag maybe a flimsy unit out into the open. If you go fairly early with this, or if you go with Dooku and you save your Aquas or something with big firepower, your B2s till the end, then you could drag them out and then shoot them. Yeah, it just feels really good. And the dodge token, not super necessary because Dooku's so survivable, but always a nice thing to have on top. And the final unit in A tier is going to be Sarge Ventress. I think this is slightly harsh on Ventress, actually. I think she could well be S tier. Yeah, she's just slightly flimsy, but she does so much damage. Like, it's just bonkers. A lot of it pivots off that 1 pip, which I'll talk about in a second, but she's basically just, like I said here, she's a homing missile. She's very flimsy. No surges. She does have 5 health, which is nice. Independent dodge 1 is pretty solid. But yeah, getting the Jarkai is great. Relentless is so good. Indomitable, say that's red dice on suppression, is decent, although that Courage 2 can still be a little bit rough, and if you lose any actions with Ventress, it can feel pretty tricky. But yeah, you can run her with almost no kit if you want to. Some people take Tenacity, some people take Saber Throw. Played against someone who brought Clairvoyance, which was quite fun, like just on those terrible red defense die rolls. She can use Clairvoyance to dig her out, and then she gets that free recover on her 2 pip if you're bringing it. Low courage, but as I said, Indomitable's fine, and yeah, she gets that Dooku synergy card as well, which I'll talk about in a second. I'll actually talk about the Dooku 3 pip now. So you treat this as a 2 pip, which is a little bit of a pain. I'd feel like this was better if it actually was a 2 pip, but Basically, Dooku gets to go, and then Ventress gets to go. Is essentially how this works. There's a lot of wording there, but that's basically how it works. Dooku getting an aim and a dodge is fine, but yeah, she can hit really hard and do loads of damage. And that 1-2 punch with Dooku Ventress is going to be enough to kill any Force user in the game. So that is a nice thing to have in your pocket if you are putting them both in. People tend not to do that, just because that maybe drags down your activation count a bit. Like these two together as a combo probably pushes like 330 points with full kit. So I can understand why that combo isn't seen too often. Yeah, but Ventress's other command cards, the Jedi Shall Fall, that Jedi Hunter is great if you are diving a Force user, especially if you got Makashi off her 3-pip. And then, yeah, the ability to just gain a bunch of suppression, gain a bunch of dodges is just always super nice. I feel like you're nearly always maxing out on that, just because it enables you to hit super hard. And then if you don't need them, you can save them for damage. So, yeah, you can save them for survivability, which is great. I am Fear. If you're planning for Ventress to survive a couple of turns, I think probably worth bringing this. Yeah, you just basically get like a flamethrower with crit 4, which is really decent. This isn't the most compelling one in the world, but if you want to play something after a dive turn to get rid of all that suppression, get your action economy back, I think this could be really decent. And then her 3-pip, which you are always bringing, either getting bounty and reinforcements, which is not the option. You should probably nearly always take Demoralize, Makashi, and Outmaneuver. Yeah, Makashi's amazing. There are enough units that can go immune to melee pierce or even impervious that are just super nice. Demoralize 1 for knocking off standbys if you need to. And then Outmaneuver, not super compelling, but yeah, the Makashi by itself I think is probably enough. So yeah, I actually think Ventress might be very close to S tier, but she's just a little bit too flimsy for me, but she's running a lot of competitive lists, is extremely good value for her points, and I definitely think putting her in S tier is valid. And finally, there's only a couple left, and I think it's probably fairly easy to spot what units they are going to be. First off, we're going to talk about Anakin. And yeah, I think it's fairly obvious why Anakin is here. He used to be 155 points, by the way, which if people ever wonder why I have a little bit of struggle having faith in the balance of this game, should I say, just remember he used to be better than he is now. He hits insanely hard and insanely consistently. He also gets Surge to crit over his, over Vader, which is really nice. And you normally will pull 1 Surge on average with this dice pool, so being able to convert those is really nice. And especially if you're whacking armor, getting a crit and then 3, natural hits to then impact up can be really good. And 4 PS3 against, red armor units can be a really big deal. Gemstone Tempted is just a brutal combination and is a really good deterrent for people trying to hit you. Yeah, Gemso, so if you miss any dice, if you blank on any dice in your attack pool, you take a wound, which is just a ridiculous, yeah, it's a huge deal. Can also be pretty crippling if you Son of Skywalkered into him, because I think it would deal 2 wounds to you, assuming you blanked on 1 dice in both, which is pretty rough. He also gets Master of the Force 1, and then Tempted for that extra swing when a friendly unit dies within range 2 can be a really big deal. Some people bring Saber Throw in order to capitalize fully on that. So even if you're not engaged with someone, you can still get off that 3 PS3 with that Saber Throw. Yeah, he just does what he says on the tin. He hits really hard. He probably won't make it through the game, but he'll probably die like end of turn 3, start of turn 4 or something. But in that time, he'll probably have thrown down like that 12 PS9 or something. Like, it's just ridiculous how much damage he can do. Couple that with some really decent command cards as well. You can run the Rex thing with the scouting party for that extra utility if you want it. It's all just such a nice combination. And while he isn't like insanely powerful in every game, I think there are some games where he can just be such a terror that he feels like he is worthy of this S tier. His command cards, his 1-pip, so you can prepare position. Much worse than Infiltrate. I'm very glad they didn't put Infiltrate on this, because my goodness. But yeah, you can choose, and most of the time it's correct to leave it at home, just because you want to bring Anakin on a bit later to kind of disguise where he's going to be coming down. Getting the free jump too, and the additional attack, like, you can basically think of this as like a free move that allows an extra attack as well, which is just bonkers. and the ability to throw what is going to be on average like 8 Pierce 6 in a turn. That's gonna kill most things. Like, yeah, crazy. You underestimate my power. I think this is a little bit tricky. The fact you don't get any effect unless you're attacking a unit with a face down order token is a bit rough. 6 white dice on average adds, what's that, 18? It probably adds about 2 hits. So that probably pushes you from like 4 and a bit PS3 to like 6 and a bit, 7 PS3, which is nice, but don't know if it merits a full command card. Like, if you have other compelling options, you can probably bring them. But yeah, this is fine. Yeah, and General Skywalker is just a few aims, a bit of inspire. It's a nice utility to have. I'd say aim's better than dodges, and again, you can share them around. And Anakin doesn't need aims necessarily, but yeah, it's fine. It's a good command card and probably worth the upgrade over Assault. But finally, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, there was only ever going to be one unit at the top of the tree, and it is going to be Commander Vader. He's not the best unit in the game, but he's very close. He continues to carry Empire on his back. Nearly every competitive Empire list that does well brings Vader, and if they're not, I don't even know. Like, I guess you could spam acts and go with like Krennic and try and do something with Callus as well, and a bunch of deaths. Maybe bring, I don't know. Anyway, Commander Vader is very strong. 6 red dice, PS3. You don't get surges, which sucks, but it is still really nice. Compel Trooper is just great. Deflect is really good to have built in. Immune Pierce, obviously. Master the Force, Relentless, all amazing. Infinite Courage. Infinite Courage changes the way the game is played. It means that your units cannot be panicked. They cannot be panicked if they are at range 3 of Vader, which means if you position him correctly, your opponent cannot stop you scoring objectives with units that are alive and touching them, which removes an entire avenue of, like, this is why I often talk about like vehicle scoring objectives being so powerful, because they can't be suppressed. You have to kill them, and that changes the way you play the game. So yeah, it's just bonkers. It also means on Vader, if you can get a standby on him, say with Krennic's 2 pip, you can't shoot that standby off. So he can just sit there as long as he wants to, and then he can whack you whenever he wants to. Like, it's crazy. It's so strong. I've already talked about his command cards, which are the best in the game. Yeah, he just does everything so well. Yes, he is a bit slow. Yes, he is a bit tricky to use. But once you get used to him and you use him correctly, he is so powerful. Saying that, I think the fact he doesn't have access to a training slot is a little bit rough, and it would be, I appreciate it's the same as like Yoda, for instance, who has the command and then the 3-4 slots. I get why he has the options he does, but it would just be nice if he had that. I also think he should have reliable 1 baked in, but apart from that, I think he's like absolutely fine. In terms of what I would bring on him normally, burst of speed, you have to bring burst of speed. Do not run Commander Vader without burst of speed, for goodness sake. Other options, saber throw is pretty compelling. Force choke is really decent, and then if you back yourself and you think you're a really good Vader player, bring force push. I normally bring choke, burst, and saber throw, and then he's 195 points and he can put in absolute work. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much to be said about Vader that I haven't already said. I think he is the best Force user, and I don't think it's particularly close. Like, there is almost another tier, which is like Vader tier, I think, just for how powerful he is in the game. But yeah, here we are. Here's the final tier list, and I'm fairly happy with it. I think I could defend most of the placements in here. I'm sure people will have different opinions down in the comments, but that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I think Fifth Brother and Seventh Sister are by some distance the worst. And then you've got kind of both Mauls. I think, unfortunately, the Maul Arrival just suffers from being a bit too expensive. Otherwise, they're pretty much identical, I would say. Like, they really share, obviously, a lot of similarities. The Operative Jedi Knight, I think, is just a little bit too flimsy, but I could definitely see pushing him into B tier and kind of that average if you wanted to. And then everything in B tier, I think, is just absolutely solid. Definitely like Obi-Wan, Custom Commander, Luke, all just Commander Luke, sorry, are all just like really consistent and will have like a very reliable impact on your game. Not super impactful, but also should never really let you down that much. Then, young Ahsoka, Yoda, Luke, kind of maybe a bit more variance there. Like sometimes they could maybe be a little bit more impactful, but I don't think they're ever going to be like the entire carry, the reason you win a game, unless you've got like a really niche situation with Op Luke, I guess, where you're like force pushing people around and things like that. It could be maybe, but yeah, I just don't think Operative Luke is good enough for his points to merit being any higher. A tier, I think all of these units have like a really consistent, impactful effect on the game. I think Ahsoka just does so much for her points. Same with Ventress, although Ventress I think does it a bit better in terms of like having an impact on the game. Then I think Grievous, Dooku, and Op Vader all just have quite a lot of power and are actually quite efficient. Well, Grievous is very efficient for his points. Operative Vader and Dooku maybe a little bit less efficient for their points, but like have so much power that they can still carry a game by themselves. And then at the top, obviously, Anakin is amazing and can put in absolute work. And then, yeah, Commander Vader needs no explanation. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, etc. And let me know what you think in the comments below. And I will see you for the next one.